Welcome to the second last tutorial considering variables and data types in Apex. In this tutorial, we are going to talk about double data type. A double data type variable can store a 64-bit number with decimal point. It can store values between -2 to the power 63 to 2 to the power 63 minus 1. Let's see an example. So we can say double sum is equal to 3.14. As we have discussed in other data types, the format for this is also the same. We have the type of variable here, which is double. We have the variable name, which is sum, and then we have the equal to sign, and then we have the value, which is 3.14. As we just learned that it can store number with decimal point, which is why we are having a decimal point here. I can execute this code and we can see this in action. Here you can see we are getting value of sum double variable is 3.14. So this is working perfectly fine. Now let's talk about the next one. But before that, if you remember, in the last tutorial, we were talking about decimal data types, right? And here also we said that it can store a number with a decimal point. However, in double data type also we are saying that it can store a number with a decimal point. But what is the difference? In general, we use double when we need less precision. For example, when we are doing scientific calculations where we can do rounding off, right? So in that case, we'll use double. However, when we need more precision, in that case, we'll use decimal. For example, financial calculations, where we don't have any chances of errors. By default, the currency fields which are there in Salesforce, they are stored as decimals. Okay. Now let's move ahead. Next, we can talk about long data type. A long data type is also a variable which can store a 64-bit number, but this is without a decimal point. It can also store values between -2 to the power 63 to 2 to the power 63 minus 1. But this is without a decimal point, which is the main differentiator here. So it can also start with a variable data type, which is long, then the variable name, which is long1 here, then we have the equal to sign, and then we have the value. What I have done here, I have created two variables, long1 and long2. Let me execute this code, and then we will understand it. If you see, the results are coming fine. So this is long1, which is this particular value, and the value of long2 long variable is this, which is this. If you notice, I don't have any L character appended after this value. However, in this value, I have the character capital L, which is appended after the value, right? The value is only till 7, but I have appended L also here. This character L is optional. You can append it as well, and you can keep it without L as well. But if you append a capital L, it makes more clear that this is a long value. So we sometimes append a value with a capital L for clarity. Where should we use long? Long can be used when we need a higher range as compared to integer. Because integer can also store values where we don't have any decimal points. So we learned about this in the previous tutorials, right? But it has a smaller range. Where you need a larger range of values, here you can use long. Now we are going to talk about date data type, date time data type, and finally time data type. Let's start with date. A date data type variable can store a date value without any information about time. What this variable is going to store? It is only going to store a date value. Now let's see how we can create one. In order to create a date variable, we are going to use a class which is known as date. In case you are not aware about what is a class, that's fine. We'll talk about it in the future tutorials. But for now, you can just understand that we are going to do date.newInstance because we are going to create a new instance of date. And then we can pass in the year, the month, and the date. And this will create a value of type date, which can be assigned to a variable of type date. So this is the variable type. This is the name, which is date1. And then the value is created using date.newInstance. So here we are passing the year, here we are passing the month, and here we are passing the day. Let me execute this code and let's see what happens. So if you see here, I'm getting value of date1, date variable is, this is the value 1994, 12, 26. So this is Christmas of 1994. Now we can also subtract a number from the date. We can also add a number from the date. What it will do is it will automatically increment or decrement the date by those many number of days. For example, if I subtract 1 from date 1, it is going to decrement the value by 1 day. If I'm going to add 1 day here, it is going to increment the value by 1 day. For example, let's say if I add 365 days. Now let's see what will happen. Let's execute this again. And here if you see, I'm getting 26 November 1995. So it has automatically incremented the date by 365 days, which is why it is coming in the next year. Now let's see what else we can do. We can also create a date variable using a string. So what we can do, we can say date.value of, and here we can pass a string in single quotes, and it will automatically create a date from this particular string. Let me execute this once as well. So if you see here I'm getting value of date from string. Date variable is 26/12/1994. You might have seen in the earlier logs as well that after each date value, I'm getting this suffix, which is nothing but 00:00:00. I told you that date variable can store a date value without any information about time, which is why we don't have any information about time here. Okay. But this is still coming when you are trying to log it. But what if you want to log it without this time? Can you do that? That is also possible. Let's see how. What we can do, we can convert this date back to a string using string.value of. So when we wanted to convert a string into a date, we use date.value of, and then we pass in the date, which is nothing but a string in the form of year, month, and day. Then we got date from here, right? Now we want to convert date to a string so that we can show it in the log. We can do that as well. Let me execute this code. And here if you see, date in string without timestamp is this. So this date is coming without this timestamp. In some scenarios, we also need to know what is today's date. So we also have a method for that as well. If we do system.today and we just add these two curly braces, it will give us today's date. Let me execute this quickly. And if you see here, I'm getting today's date. So today's date when I'm recording this video is 23 June 2024. Now you might think that we can perform some operations as well, like we can do in integer and decimals, right? Like plus, minus, divide. So let's see if we can do that with dates. Here I'm trying to add two date values. Let's execute this code. And if you see, I'm getting an error here. It is saying date expression must use integer or long, which means that you can only add an integer or a long to a date expression, right? You cannot add two date expression, or I can say you cannot add a date expression to another date expression. This is not allowed. However, if I do here like 10L, this is still allowed. Okay. So you can add integers and you can also add long values to dates. This is working fine. And if you really think about it, we don't have any such scenario where we need to really add two dates. We might need to add some days to a particular date, which we can already do from here. We might need to subtract days from a particular date, but there is hardly a scenario where you need to add two different dates, which is why these operations are not allowed and these are not needed as well. Now let's talk about datetime data type. A datetime data type variable can store a datetime value like a timestamp. So if you remember, in the date variable, the timestamp was empty. It was 00:00:00. But here we'll have the timestamp as well. Let's see how we can create it. The method is really simple. Again, type of variable, which is datetime, the name of variable, which is date1, is equal to, and as I was doing date.newInstance, here I'm doing datetime.newInstance because I'm creating an instance of datetime. Let's execute this code. So if you see here, the value of date1 datetime variable is 25/12/1994 and then 1830::. So here we are also getting the value inside the timestamp. We can also try the same thing here, that is converting the string into a datetime. So if I try this, you can see here that I'm getting an error here. So it is saying invalid datetime 12/26/1994 because this is not a datetime. This is actually a date. So what we can do, we can specify the hour, minute, and second as well. So we can say, let's say 23 hour and then 11 minute and then 10 seconds. And if I try to execute this once again now you can see I'm getting this perfectly fine. So I'm getting value of datetime from string. Datetime variable is 1994/12/26, and then the time is coming as 17:41:10. You might be thinking that why it is coming as 17:41 and not 23:11. This is because by default the time component inside the datetime is in GMT format. And currently I'm in India, so the IST format is GMT plus 5:30, which is why it has automatically subtracted 5 hours and 30 minutes from this particular time, and it is coming as 17:41. This is fine, and again I can convert back a date time into a string. This is also possible. So let me execute this whole code. Now if you see, we are getting value of date time string as 1994, 1226, 1741, 10. And again, if we convert it into a string, it is coming back as 23, 11, 10. Now let's talk about time data type. A time data type variable can store a time value, as simple as that, which indicates a particular time. How we can create a time data type? It is exactly the same as other variables. Here we have the variable type, which is time, variable name, which is time1, is equal to sign, and then time.newInstance, and then we are getting the time. So time is nothing but number of hours, number of minutes, number of seconds, and number of milliseconds. So if I execute this code, here you can see the value of time1 time variable is 14 hours, 25 minutes, 30 seconds, and then 100 milliseconds. Similarly, if you have a time variable already, let's say if you have a time already and you want to get the hour from it, or if you want to get a minute from it, or if you want to get a second from it, or the millisecond from it, that also you can do. This is very similar to what we did earlier. So when we wanted to get today's date, we did system.today and then a curly braces, right? Similarly, we did time1.hour and then a curly braces. For now, you can just remember this format, but it will be more clear when we understand about classes and methods in the future tutorials, because this is nothing but an instance of a class, and this is a method that we are calling, which is returning us the hour value of our time. Let's execute this whole code. And now if you see here, the time is this 14, 25, 30. Value of hour is 14, value of minute is 25, value of second is 30, and value of millisecond is 100. In case you increase any particular value, for example, if I say that, instead of 30 minutes, instead of 30 seconds, I'm going to say 60 seconds. Now 60 seconds is again equal to a minute, right? And in case I execute this code, what will happen is it will automatically increment a minute. So here you can see the time is coming as 14:26 instead of 25, because 60 seconds is nothing but a minute. So it has automatically incremented the time. You can play around with it, try with different values, and see how these variables work in AVIX. So this is all about time variable. In this video, what we did, we learned about double data type, long data type, and then date, date time, and finally time. That's all for this video. I'll see you next time.